You're listening
What's
to the
going on,
Jersey
everyone?
First.
You are listening to the Jersey First TV network, and I'm AJ Malillo.
I'm Steven Rambola.
And this is a great way to start off. If you couldn't tell, I have not had my coffee yet. It's early. We're doing this on Wednesday because Steve's got a big weekend coming up. But hey, we're here for the people.
That's what we do.
You know, and I say it's early as if I wasn't up 2 hours ago and I just haven't had coffee yet. You know, it's not that
Yeah.
early.
No.
It
This is actually like for some days of the week, this is like, oh yeah, you're about halfway through the day today.
Right. No, exactly. I'm on Tuesdays. So we're recording this on Wednesday. It's about 10 a.m. So like I'm already two classes or like starting my second class by this point. So
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm complaining about. I'm just complaining.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you complain to complain, and it feels good. It feels good because it's, who wants to get up, really,
Fair.
except for us, and talk about these issues that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, well, today's not a big issue day, right? Today's our book day. It's
Yes.
book day over here on Bridging the Gap.
It was more of a, in theory, if it wasn't a book day, the book day is a one-off, a once a month.
You're right. You're right. But you do have a big weekend going on. What's going on, Steve?
True. I am hopping on a flight and I'm taking a little road trip down south. I'm going to tour some law schools. Try and have a little bit of fun while I'm down there. So we'll see. It's going to be fun, interesting, a lot of driving. I'm like flying not as far south as I need to go to then drive the rest of the way south. But listen, I'll say this much. I travel, I'd say a decent amount, not a crazy bunch, but enough. And the thing that I've learned is as long as you put in a little bit of work, traveling can be really cheap. Because I've budgeted round trip, the flight. You ready for this? So I'm leaving from Atlantic City. I'm gonna land in Myrtle Beach, and then I'm leaving back to AC from Orlando to give you a sort of like scope of the roundness of the trip here. Flights, I paid $100 last week, but because I used Google and they price match and they give you back the difference if your tickets drop, I've ended up paying like $88 round trip for this flight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are good flights at a good time because it's spring break, so there's going to be a lot of flights. So.
Yeah, which is crazy. And then I don't know. I'm not afraid of a shady Airbnb here and there. Cut some corners, save some pocket change. So traveling's fun. Traveling's awesome. I'm gonna tour 2 law schools down there. I have some tours scheduled up, so hopefully going to be able to sit in on classes, meet some students, professors, faculty. And with regard to law school, we were just talking about this, sent out an application to a prestigious New Jersey institution in Rutgers University out in Newark. So who knows? There's a seemingly good chance that I could end up being the J1 representative, still sticking it out in Jersey. So
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, we are on Jersey First TV, and this is a Jersey centric podcast. So remember, subscribe J First TV on YouTube. So you could get Bridging the Gap. You can get the Nader Narrative. You can get Real Talk. Also, of course, come to our website jerseyfirst.org. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for the pledge, get all the information, and it makes sense to keep you in Jersey, Steve. You got to have boots on the ground.
yeah, I'll be like the beat reporter, for the next 3 years, holding it down. So it's been exciting. It's been fun, and I feel like I've closed that chapter now officially of applying to law schools. I've already been accepted to some. I'm still waiting to hear back, and obviously I'll wait to hear back now from Rutgers. But I can kind of just like, for 1 second in the process, which you are, a few steps ahead of, and I know you know the feeling, where before you have to make that decision and get into the logistics of everything, you just like kind of, okay, like phase 1 complete. Now it's decision time, and after decision time, it's doing the thing time.
Right. I actually remember earlier this month, I got my little notification that came up that was like a year ago today, you posted this, and it was my a, acceptance of Villanova's like acceptance in deciding to go here.
That's a big day.
Um,
I remember
yeah,
it.
yeah, we were in. I was in Florida,
Yep.
um, and because my parents were down there, and it was fun. I remember I was waiting for a couple of other schools. I heard back from Villanova pretty early, but I was waiting for from a couple other schools, and then I made my decision. Um, and yeah, so that's a big day too. But you're right. There's like a deep breath. Okay, now I just decide where I want to go. And I pretty much knew that I wanted to go here. Um, I pretty much had that in my head already anyway. Unless I
Yeah.
got into University of Florida, I think was the other big one. Uh, so, but I'm glad I chose here and I'm here. I couldn't have imagined it going any different now at this point.
Yeah. It seems right. It feels right when
Yeah.
I've seen you out there and hearing you talk about it, like, and having been there. Villanova AJ is just that character that I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's certainly for the story, for the character arc, makes sense.
It works. So
But yeah,
I
and I
got a
think
busy
that
week.
Jersey Steve too, like that just
Oh,
that feels right.
you know what? And that's that. It's. I'll say this much, and then I'll stop. When I say acceptance and a moment of acceptance, I mean it's one of those situations where you know the song, the Bon Jovi song.
I'm familiar.
Oh, what's it called? Oh my God, who says you can't go home? Right?
Sure, sure,
He's
sure.
got that line in it where he's like, they took the home from the boy, but not the boy from his home.
Right.
That's kind of what I feel like right now.
Mm.
Like I need to be here. I feel at peace here, and I'm accepting that I was trying to like not be here, and I don't really know why. And it caused me to have this moment, this deep breath. Like in that deep breath, there's a lot of reflection about the things around me, the things that make New Jersey so great, that make me love this place and want to like live, breathe, and die by this place. And Rutgers is like the embodiment of that. That is like the pinnacle of that. I know we were talking a few weeks ago. We're both the product of New Jersey public schools, and for me to just K to 12, college, master's degree, law school, all at like really nice, respected New Jersey institutions would really fulfill me in a beautiful way. And I realize how important that is to me. So I'm very excited. Jersey Steve, Villanova AJ, we're going to run this thing.
Yeah, I
It's
mean
what we do.
that. I want to say Florida Steve has a lot of interesting implications too.
Yes, yes, it does.
California Steve, I'll say, has interesting implications. I just don't know if it's my favorite of the bunch.
Yes, yes. Well, I can tell you with confidence that if it's not Rutgers, it's most certainly going to be Florida.
So Florida Steve, I think, could be a lot of fun too.
Yes, I think Florida Steve could be a good time.
Yeah. But anyway, let's get into some stories because honestly, I didn't have that crazy of a week, and I don't have that crazy of a weekend planned, so it's not that big of a deal. So we got one story, and then we're gonna get into our books. So
Yes,
Steve, why don't you lead us in that story?
yes. So it's nothing crazy, but I saw yesterday that the White House has sort of issued this order that's given federal employees 30 days to delete TikTok off their phones. So deals with all the things that we've been talking about for so many weeks with the security functions, privacy issues related to TikTok, how they collect information on you, your habits, your, algorithm building stuff that shows you just the right perfect videos that you want to see, which totally isn't creepy at all. um, but this comes quite soon after the same order was given to federal government employees in Canada. So basically, all of North America has taken a look at the security implications of TikTok and told their federal employees, yeah, on our devices, government issued phones, laptops, computers, iPads, whatever you want, TikTok's a no-go. It is not a safe app and collects too much important data. That begs the question to me, and I feel weird even asking this because it's a government trust issue in the back of my head and whatever, but if the government doesn't want TikTok on their phones, do I want it on mine? Like,
Well, I think that it's quite clear because I know that in Europe they're looking at these too. Obviously, the Trump administration was looking at it. It's quite clear that there's a lot of data being harvested on this app in particular, and it's all going back to the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. So I think that it's fair to ask the question. It's like, if the government doesn't want it on their phones, what makes it okay to be on mine? And I guess, I mean, you don't have that much secret information on your phone. Like, you have personal information, but you don't have that much like major national security implicated information. Unless you do, Steve, unless there's things I don't know about you. But I think that ultimately the question you have to ask yourself is if you're comfortable with your personal information being used in this way. If you like the app enough to keep it on your phone, basically. If you like that algorithm really pushing you curated content for your feed. But it's interesting implications, and I think that it's sort of like entering into a new age of the digital world, so to speak. There's going to be a lot less privacy. There's going to be a lot less, I'll say, independence on between platforms because TikTok basically uses all of your platforms. It has access to everything. So this is going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. And it seems like the question now is that we don't like this because it's a foreign adversary's government taking advantage of it. But who's to say that the U.S. government doesn't make a deal with Meta or Twitter or something,
Yeah. I think too, one of the things that makes this issue so, I don't think it's particularly divisive. Like, I haven't seen people really pushing back on the notion of this. So I think if this news can come out and it can be pretty well received, I see no reason in the future that it might come to a point where the government's like, hey, we are not going to allow this app to operate in our country on these phones, and if that's what it is, that's what it is. I think the public reaction here is surprising to me, is what I'm trying to get at, because you do have a lot of people who have changed their lives on this application, who have, built a network of clients, of people that they can sell products to. People have launched successful businesses, companies, podcasts. Like, in such a short amount of time too, this app has been the catalyst for a lot of good for a lot of people. And if nothing else, a source of really like new, fun, engaging entertainment. But to also see the public reaction that, it's being taken off these government phones. I know when the Trump administration was looking at having it taken off the App Store and not operating in America, everybody was like, Trump's canceling TikTok. Trump's going to take TikTok away. And, it was like this sensational hit. But I mean, 2 years down the line now, he had something going. He was onto something. And the reaction now is so much different.
Of course, it helps that the media doesn't want to make Joe Biden look bad. So it's a lot easier for them to just turn around and say, hey, yeah, no, hem and haw. And but I'd say in a lot of ways, though, what you said is right. And at the end of the day, I have no concern that if any administration, whether it's this one or the next one, says, hey, we're going to get rid of TikTok on the App Store, there won't be an American copycat fairly soon thereafter.
Of course.
I have full faith in our American STEM, members, and we'll be fine.
Of course. I will miss, the old, I don't know, something about the old versions of like TikTok where it was like these funny dances that like celebrities that you never expected to be doing were doing. Like, I don't know. It's fun entertainment. I totally get it. And it puts you in this weird position as a consumer, right? Because you are, now that it's in the public discourse, you kind of have this, I don't want to say obligation, but if you think about things, and maybe I think too much about some things, every time I open the app, I'm like, well, Xi Jinping is, getting another look into my life today. And I'm okay with that because of the serotonin boost that I get. So,
All right. And I think, you know what, Steve, I think that this is a perfect place to move on to the books for this month, because the book that I read, it's scary in a way how similar the fiction of this book is to real life. Because you really hit the nail on the head by saying, I don't really care because I get this serotonin boost, which is all that this book is really predicated on. And that would be Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I have a physical copy.
oh,
And basically, this is a dystopian novel. But what's interesting about this novel is, and I think makes it more interesting than some other dystopian novels, I think the most credited or cited one would be 1984, is that you read it in the context of the 21st century. And you say to yourself, is it that bad? Genuinely? This seems like a pretty fine society to me in a lot of ways, especially looking at it from, if you're more of a liberal-minded young person in the 21st century. Let me just set up a couple of things, and then we'll get into a little bit more weedy. But it's a society where everybody knows exactly their roles. Everybody knows their functions. They have jobs that are tailored specifically for them to have the best output into the society as a whole. There's no such thing as in this world, there's no such thing as family, because there's no childbirth anymore. Children are basically made in a lab, in like a factory setting. So there's no childbirth, there's no mothers, there's no fathers, there's no families. Everybody grows up, and then they reach about the age of, say, like 25-ish, like prime, and then they stay that age forever, and then at 60 they just kind of die. Like, it's just like you live for 60 years, everybody lives for 60 years, and you stop aging at like 25. So you're young forever. And everything in life is, you go to work, you have sex, you take drugs. And the drugs are to make you happy. You don't feel any of the negative consequences after. Like, there's no side effects to it. You just pure serotonin boost. Like, you're feeling good. And then there's no wives, there's no husbands. Everybody can have relations with everybody. It doesn't matter. Everybody belongs to everybody, to quote the book, right? So that sits on its face. And I think that a lot of people in our society and generation today, it's like, that sounds pretty great. That doesn't sound too bad.
It's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
Right. There's no disease. There's nothing like that. Now, where it gets a little bit more scary is in the concept of how they create children in this factory, and they purposefully starve certain eggs from oxygen to make them less. So it's like they make alphas, betas, and so on. And so, like, alphas are given like the most pristine process in this, I'll say, child rearing, even though it's not how we look at it, right? And then betas are like starved of a little bit of oxygen so that they're a little bit less developed than the alphas, and so on. And until you get to like the bottom of the barrel, where basically they split the egg. So over like 96 times or something, like I don't have the exact number in front of me, but so much so that they're all identical twins, but they're so split that they're like super, super low functioning. So like, these are the people that do the grunt work of the society, right? And so you've created this society, this class system, but it's not really authoritarian, and it's not really anarchy. It's like an anarcho-communism, I guess, because everybody is just fulfilling their role, which they have been taught from birth. There's not really like any like larger movers and shakers. I mean, there are people in charge and power, but they don't really have to police much of anything because everybody just does what they're supposed to do because they've been pumped with these drugs and they've been taught these things since they were very young. And children are sexualized from a very young age, and all of this comes from the ideas of two thinkers. They're gods. It's Ford and Freud, right? So Ford is the mechanical, the economic, the mover and shaker in that field, and Freud is the mover and shaker in the psychological field. So it's like very much impulse driven, it's very much sexually driven, psychologically. um there's no families. Like mother in this world is a curse word. If you call somebody a mother, like that's a bad word in the world, and it's basically completely stripped away the difference between the sexes because there's no child bearing or rearing, right? Everybody can just have casual sex with anybody and there's no consequences to the actions. There's no old things, there's no old people, there's no old books, there's no old stories. Everything is new. Everything has to be new. And then there are two main characters that, for most books, Bernard Marx and the female character Lenina. Marx and Lenin, obviously. So Bernard Marx is like this alienated guy. He kind of feels inadequate. He kind of doesn't want to have just random casual sex with everyone. And he feels this way until he is accepted into the society, which he eventually does become later in the book. Lenina, the female protagonist, is very much in society, but later in the book you see that she has this sort of drive for monogamy. Like she doesn't want to be going with everyone. She kind of falls in love, but she doesn't really understand it. And who she falls in love with is a guy that they created, or that they found rather, who what his name is John Savage. So outside of the Brave New World Society, there's savage societies of these people that are basically live outside of the norm. So they still believe in God, and it's kind of like a mix of Native American culture and Catholic culture. And so they still believe in God, but they're outside of society. So they do like very basic tribal things. They hunt, they fish, they gut old, they live with families, all of these things. And basically you get the story a long time ago. Two people from the Brave New World Society went to this one. The woman got lost and hurt and wound up being pregnant. And since there was no, abortions or anything where she had the baby. And so he was like born of Brave New World people, but into this savage culture. Eventually, Bernard Marx and Lenina find him. They take him back with them, along with his mother, and I'll just say that's where the story happens. Chaos ensues. That's where like things start to get out of order because this guy comes and he kind of ruined everything. And now John Savage has learned English and learned all of these things because there's one book, and it's a book of like the great Shakespeare plays. So basically everything he knows about society and love and culture is Shakespeare. But there's no Shakespeare in the Brave New World Society. And it culminates in the ending with the conversation that he has with Mustafa Mond, who's the guy in charge of all of Europe. I believe he's like the controller. And in it ends with this. And this is kind of the thesis of the book and the big calling card. They have this debate about why the Brave New World Society isn't great and isn't what they think it is. And and John Savage says, so the controller says, John Savage says, but I like inconveniences. Then the controller says, we don't. We prefer to do things comfortably. But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mond, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right, then, said the savage defiantly. I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Then, not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen, to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. I claim them all, said the savage at last. Right? So it's that question. It's the question of what is freedom? If you are given all of the goodness in the world, all of the serotonin, all of the sex you can muster, everything and anything, everything is curated for you. You're not free in that society. And those things aren't good because there is no bad. Right? And so then that jogged my brain to remind me of one of my favorite books I've ever read, ever, which is Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, in which he similarly talks about this idea. And he talks about reason and how reason has leads us down this path to sort of do what is the most pleasurable. And he says, I agree completely. It isn't, let me actually start. I suspect, gentlemen, that you are looking at me with pity. You repeat to me that an enlightened and developed man, such in short as the future man will be, simply cannot knowingly want anything unprofitable for himself. That is the mathematics. That this is mathematics, excuse me. I agree completely. It is indeed mathematics. But I repeat to you for the 100th time, there is only one case, one only, where man may purposefully, consciously wish for himself even the harmful, the stupid, even what is stupidest of all, namely, so as to have the right to wish for himself even what is stupidest of all, and not be bound by an obligation to wish for himself only what is intelligent. For this stupidest of all, this caprice of ours, gentlemen, may in fact be the most profitable of anything on earth for our sort, especially in certain cases. Meaning, this wish for things that are bad, for negative things to happen, is the most profitable wish that we have as humans because it makes us have the ability of free choice. It allows us. He goes on later and he makes like some brilliant analogies talking about, now I ask you, what can be expected of a man as a being endowed with such strange qualities? Shower him with all earthly blessings, drown him in happiness completely over his head so that only bubbles pop up on the surface of happiness as on water. Give him such economic satisfaction that he no longer has anything left to do at all except sleep, eat gingerbread, and worry about non-cessation of world history. And it is here, just here, that he, this man, out of sheer ingratitude, out of sheer lapoonery, will do something nasty. He will risk his gingerbread and wish on purpose for the most pernicious nonsense, the most non-economical, meaningless, solely in order to mix into all this positive good sense his own pernicious, fantastical element. It is precisely his fantastic dreams, his most banal stupidity, that he will wish to keep hold of, with the sole purpose of confirming to himself, as if it were so necessary, that human beings are still human beings and not piano keys, which, though played upon with their own hands, may, by the law of nature themselves, are danger of being played so much that outside the calendar it will be impossible to want anything. It's the analogy of you can give men anything and everything, but men are not piano keys to be played. They will not. You cannot hit them and strike the pitch you want. They will mess it up for the sake of being free, for the sake of remembering their own humanity. And that is the problem of Brave New World. They have stripped humanity from the world. They have stripped the vice. They stripped virtue because they said that virtue is in vice, and the vice of sex, the vice of drugs and pleasure, because life doesn't happen in those. Life happens in the immediate. It's accepting those pleasures in life when you should accept them. It gets rid of temperance. It gets rid of all of the things that actively make for a good and healthy life. The good and healthy life is found in the struggle of taking what is bad and doing the right thing, the good thing. And that's where life is found. It's not found in the drugs. It's not found in the sex. It's not found in the meaningless communal society for all. It's found in what is truly human, which is dealing with these struggles in the proper way. And if you give somebody everything, they will risk it all to remind themselves that they're human. And that's the book that I read this month. It's Brave New World, and it's an absolute classic for a reason and very interesting.
So we've done it again. I will say with the utmost confidence, we have done it again, and I remember, if you recall, when we began this month's books, we said, I don't know if these books are going to have that much in common. Surprise, surprise. They do. So the piece that you read from Brave New World, that discussion, can you talk about what John Savage, can you just reread what he says? Because when you said it, the light bulb went off for me, and I want to tie these two things together.
So the controller says, without any of these, that he's calling Othello being murdered and Desdemona being murdered inconveniences, right? And then he says, but I like the inconveniences. This is John. He said, I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin.
Perfect.
And then he says that I'm claiming the right to be unhappy.
Perfect. You know who is a man who has claimed the right to be unhappy and fully embraced it? None other than this gentleman here. This
David
blur
Goggins.
is killing me. David Goggins. So I read this book, never finished. The second book that David Goggins has wrote. The short course on David Goggins, if you don't know, ultra marathon runner, retired Navy SEAL, all around absolute badass. The dude is an athlete to his core. He is a public speaker. He is so many things. But coincidentally, the term that he uses for himself throughout this book, the prior, and any interviews he does, is savage. He says, I am a savage. And I heard Joe Rogan actually talking about this the other day, where he says Goggins' mentality is, you're not just a savage for 6 months and you earn that title for the rest of your life. You wake up every single day and you live and you breathe and you die by being a savage. So this book, never finished. What I read this month might have really pushed a lot this last week, but is, like I said, second autobiography that Goggins wrote. And the first one, it's hard to talk about the book without talking about his story. The first one was about his experiences going through Navy SEAL training, being a Navy SEAL, his relationship with the military, and how it has sort of been the catalyst for so much positive change in his life. This guy who goes out and runs these, 100+ mile races, these 200-mile ultra marathon races. Before all of this, he talks about being 24, weighing over 300 pounds, spraying for cockroaches and drinking milkshakes and eating packs of Oreos. And now all of a sudden he's one of the most prestigious public speakers, has a decorated military career. And like I said, is an ultra endurance athlete. And these books serve as sort of his, I'll say, cathartic expression of the self and going through the journeys and reliving the experiences that unlock the power in his mind to allow him to achieve such incredible and almost unfathomable accomplishments. So this book talks a lot about running, which is something that I don't do. And once I kind of got into it and I realized that it wasn't going to be a, like his first book, which was very much like, I did this hard thing and now I'm better and hoorah, you got to do this, this, and this. I was thrown off a little bit. I wasn't as excited to read it. I'm always excited to hear what this guy has to say. And then he did this thing, and I didn't know it was part of the book, but he gives you, and I'll show you real quick. So I'll show you, like, I want to talk about this one. So chapter 2, right? Chapter 2, I don't know how we feel about expletives on this particular program, so I'm going to refrain. But chapter 2 is Merry Effing Christmas. That's the name of the chapter. And he talks about a Christmas where his stepdad, when he was a child, was, brutally murdered. Real light reading. And he goes on to talk about all the things that happen in his life around Christmas and what make it, such a hard holiday and time of year for him. And he opens it up to this bigger concept of, like, he just chucked it up and it was Christmas and all these bad things happen. But guess what? Merry effing Christmas. That's what happens. Sort of suck it up. And what was so interesting about this book to me is, right, so you have chapter 2, you read through the chapter, and then at the end of the chapter, he has these things that he writes that are these evolutions. I don't know, you can't see it. The blur is really killing me. So it's like chapter 1 and then evolution 1, chapter 2, evolution 2. And these evolutions are sort of these discussions in a more candid way about the point of the stories that he just told you. So I think it's a really interesting way to structure a book. And this is how he did the first one as well, where he tells you a story, walks you through it, all the details, everything. And then if you didn't get the point, he lays it out plain English for you. And then at the end of it, he issues you a challenge, an evolution, if you will, because that's what they call the challenges throughout SEAL School. And this one I thought was so interesting. And I think there's 9 of them in the book because there's 9 chapters. And this evolution is, it's time to make your own mixtape. And that's it. And he spends this whole thing talking about dealing with hate because the murder of his stepfather was motivated by hate. He was at one point, a black guy living in a predominantly white neighborhood that had KKK meetings happening down the street from him. So he's grown up around hate. He receives a lot of hate for the way that he talks about his experiences in the military, his general attitude towards life. And he talks about something that he did recently when he was trying to get back into marathon running, where he would read the comments on his Instagram and he would take all the negative comments and, sort of like copy and paste them. And he would sit there and he would read them out loud and record himself reading these comments, saying things like, I don't know, let me use this one, for example. It's people like you that are trying to divide this country. The state has to ask for help from the federal government, but you already know that. You're just trying to get clicks. Move out of your mother's basement and grow. Somebody may or may not have said that on the Bridging the Gap Instagram to AJ and I. That's beside the point. He would go ahead and he'd record these hate comments and then play them back in an actual track while he runs, while he does pull-ups. This guy set the world record for most pull-ups. He did like 4,000 of them in 17 hours, which is crazy. And he goes into so much more in the book. He talks about a lot of hardships. He has a lot of health issues, dealing with, broken legs, finishing marathons on broken legs, which just doesn't even sound human. And anytime you encounter this guy, and even me, somebody who's a fan of him, and I read what he goes through, you're left there and you're like, why? Like, why do you need to go and finish this marathon on broken legs? He talks about how he had kidney failure during one of his ultra marathons, and he was running and blood was just like as he would pee, it was just blood, and you're like, why would you do this? You're bringing yourself to the brink of death. You are suffering for the sake of suffering. And he owns that fact, and it is suffering for the sake of suffering. And I think that is something, the thread that I want to, tie together here, which is he's done the things. He had the illustrious military career. He could go and he could public speak and he could sell products and have the cozy life and all the serotonin that he wants, the happiness, the gratification. And this book is a written expression of a commitment that he made to himself, which is that he is quite literally never finished. He never wants the comfort, because when you get comfortable, you die. In whatever sense you want to take that. But that's his whole message. And this book, to me, truly, as much as the first one was, brings you to that space. And he does such a great job at illustrating why hard things are important, why doing hard things are important, seeking comfort in the discomfort. And I want to leave with this little one of the evolutions that he does, where he talks about taking oaths to the self. And he wrote in this book the oath that he speaks out loud to himself. And I just wanted to share it because I think we can draw lines here. He says, "I live with a day one, week one mentality. This mentality is rooted in self-discipline, personal accountability, and humility. While most people stop when they're tired, I stop when I am done. In a world where mediocrity is often the standard, my life's mission is to become uncommon amongst the uncommon." If that don't get you fired up, I don't know what will. So to me, again, it's just so interesting to see a guy who has everything that he ever wanted, and it's not enough, and he wants to suffer. He wants to be uncomfortable. He wants the pain. He finds personal strength, and he learns about himself, and he offers a lot of valuable commentary about the world around him through experiencing hard things. And I see him, if he was in the Brave New World, he's the John Savage, 100%. He is the guy that wants the hard things, that wants the freedom to be unhappy, like Dostoevsky said, the freedom to, experience these bad things, because the freedom of choice, essentially. And he chooses to learn through suffering. And I think it's powerful and a mindset that could take anybody anywhere.
Well, I think that there's a lot there, but the biggest thread that you mentioned is this growth through suffering. There is no growth in the Brave New World society because everybody is doing exactly what they're told to do when they're supposed to do it. And there's no love, there's no connection, there's just people living. And it's this idyllic life, but is it? You don't have any real connection with anybody. You have no emotions, right? You're constantly working on 0 to 10. When life doesn't happen in 0 to 10, life happens in like negative a million to positive a million.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able, and if for life to mean anything, you have to be able to choose discomfort, to choose suffering, and not just choose it, but like live it,
Embrace
accept it,
it.
and get out of it. Because serotonin is fleeting, happiness is fleeting. Most of life doesn't happen in these idyllic spaces.
Who's
It
the
happens.
philosopher that said existence is suffering?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's true in a very real way. And it sort of also brings me to an idea of like Aristotelian ethics and Nicomachean ethics, where it's like trying to find the middle ground between two vices, right? Between virtue happens in knowing when to do what. And it's not just picking, pleasure and happiness all of the time. Sometimes you have to pick, saving your money and not using it to get that thing you want. Or sometimes you have to pick taking a step back from a difficult situation and analyzing it before just jumping into the fire, right? It's these ideas. There's a reason why they have permeated throughout history. It's because human beings haven't changed that much in the last 10,000 years, as much as
True.
we want to think we have.
I couldn't have said it better. I would say if there's one lesson, it's find comfort in being uncomfortable.
It's where most of your life's going to happen.
It's true.
Look, that's all I got. I think that's all we got for this week.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up. I'm AJ Malillo,
I'm Stephen Rombolo.
and we'll come back next week with our books for the month of March. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll talk to you all then. Bye, everybody.
Peace.